My name is Ardella Norris, and I'm 29 years old. If I had to describe my 20s in one word, it would be sacrifice. For 3 years, I worked two jobs so my husband Gabriel could finish medical school. I managed a small cafe by day, making lattes for strangers, who barely looked at me, and stayed up late at night doing freelance graphic design to pay for rent textbooks and his endless exam fees. Gabriel used to tell me I was his reason, his anchor. When I'm a doctor, Ardella, he'd pause, then correct himself. Ardella, when I'm a doctor, we'll finally be free. I believed him. I believed every time he said, just one more semester. Every time I ignored my own exhaustion and told myself this was love, two people chasing a dream together. Our apartment was small, barely big enough for both of us, and his stack of anatomy books, but it was ours. I'd cook ramen on the stove while he studied at the table. Sometimes I'd doze off on the couch, waiting for him to finish reading about cardiac rhythms. There were nights he'd look up, eyes bleary, and whisper, "You're the reason I'm going to make it." I thought that was romance. I didn't realize it was foreshadowing. The night before his graduation, I ironed his white coat, the one I'd saved up to buy him. It felt symbolic, like I was smoothing out the wrinkles of all the hard years behind us. When I handed it to him, he smiled distractedly, scrolling on his phone. "Thanks, babe," he said, not looking up. Babe. Somehow the word that once made me feel loved now sounded like background noise. At the ceremony the next day, my parents cried harder than I did. They adored Gabriel, the charming son-in-law who made the family proud. My dad shook his hand, saying, "You're going places, son." I stood beside him, clapping, smiling, pretending my stomach wasn't twisting when he barely looked at me from the stage. After the ceremony, he kissed my forehead and said, "We did it." But I caught the flicker of hesitation when he added, "My next step is at St. Havens Hospital. Dr. Rachel Lang offered me a position on her research team." I remembered that name. Rachel Lang, the celebrated surgeon he never stopped talking about. 40-something, divorced, brilliant. The woman who believed in him. When he introduced me to her at the after-party, she had that kind of presence that filled the room. Tailored suit. Calm, confidence eyes that assessed everything without apology. "So this is the famous Ardella," she said, shaking my hand. The woman behind his white coat. Her tone was polite, but her smile lingered on Gabriel longer than it should have, and he didn't seem to notice. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just admiration between colleagues. But that night when we came home, Gabriel stayed up replying to emails. I sat in bed watching his reflection in the laptop light. He laughed softly at something he read. "Who's that?" I asked. "Rachel," he said. "She's giving me advice for my first week." I nodded, forcing a smile. "She seems supportive." "She is. She says she sees potential in me. It's refreshing to be around someone who actually understands this world." This world. The word stuck. Like maybe somehow I didn't belong in it anymore. The first few months after Gabriel started at St. Havens Hospital felt like living with a ghost. He was there, but never present. He'd leave before sunrise, come home after midnight, smelling of antiseptic and exhaustion. I used to wait up for him making tea and setting out dinner he rarely touched. Eventually, I stopped waiting. At first, I thought it was stress. Every new doctor goes through it, the long shifts, the impossible expectations. But soon the way he looked at me changed. There was distance in his eyes, like every word I said had to travel miles to reach him. He started speaking differently, too. Phrases like, "That's not professional," or "People in my field don't do that," slipped into our conversations. My husband, the same man who once thanked me for holding his world together, now sighed when I talked about my art clients. "It's cute that you enjoy design," he said one night, scrolling through medical journals. Cute. Like it was a hobby. Like my work didn't keep our lights on for 3 years. He began dressing differently. Tailored suits, silk ties, a watch that definitely wasn't ours. "Where did you get that?" I asked. "Gift from the hospital," he said without meeting my eyes. Later, I found a thank you card in his briefcase from Rachel. At dinner, he'd bring her up constantly. "Rachel says I should focus on cardiothoracic surgery. Rachel thinks I have leadership potential. Rachel recommended this new wine." I told myself I was being paranoid, that Gabriel was just inspired by a mentor. But the truth was, he'd stopped saying we a long time ago. Then came the night that shattered the illusion completely. I was cleaning up the kitchen when his phone buzzed. It was lying face up on the counter, one new message from Rachel. "You looked incredible today. I can't stop thinking about it." My hands froze on the dish towel. I waited for guilt to flash across his face when he noticed I'd seen it. But instead, he calmly took his phone and said, "You shouldn't go through my messages, Ardella. That's what you're worried about. My voice cracked. Not the message itself. He sighed like I was inconveniencing him. Rachel and I have a connection. It's not what you think. Then what is it? I demanded. He leaned against this counter, arms folded. It's about ambition. Understanding. You wouldn't get it. You're comfortable staying small. The words hit harder than any confession of cheating. Small, I repeated. I worked 2 jobs so you could chase your dream, Gabriel. I built your future from scratch. He shrugged, and I appreciate it, but I've outgrown this. I stared at him, waiting for him to take it back. What do you mean this? This life, he said simply. This apartment, these late-night arguments. I'm trying to move forward. You're stuck. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. Are you saying you're leaving me? I'm saying I already have. His tone was flat, detached. Rachel understands me. She challenges me. You just make me feel guilty for succeeding. The rest of the night played out in silence. I packed his clothes one by one, the lab coats, the cufflinks I'd saved to buy the stupid watch she'd given him. He didn't stop me, didn't argue, didn't even look up from his phone. When I closed the suitcase, he finally said, "This doesn't have to be ugly, Ardella. We've both changed." "No," I whispered. "You changed. I just finally see it." The next morning, his side of the closet was empty. The scent of his cologne still hung in the air like an echo that refused to fade. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there realizing that everything I'd built for us, every sacrifice, every sleepless night had turned into the foundation of someone else's life. I didn't know whether to laugh or break down, so I did neither. I went to work. Because what else do you do when your whole world leaves before breakfast? The first week after Gabriel left felt like walking through fog, every sound muted, every color drained. I kept moving only because standing still hurt more. I went to work at the cafe, smiled at customers, and came home to an apartment that smelled like burnt coffee and loneliness. At night, I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering if Rachel ever had to scrub dishes until her hands cracked. My mother called every day. "Ardella, sweetheart, you should talk to him. Maybe it's just stress. Men panic when they reach success too fast." "Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "he didn't panic. He prepared." That silenced her. 2 months passed. I stopped checking social media, stopped counting the days since he left. Instead, I started taking therapy sessions once a week. My therapist asked, "When was the last time you did something just for yourself?" I couldn't remember. So I started small. Morning walks. Drawing again, rebranding my freelance work into something bigger, my own studio. I named it White Ember Design because sometimes even what's burned can still glow. While I was rebuilding piece by piece, Gabriel's new life seemed perfect from the outside. There were articles about Dr. Gabriel Hayes, the promising young surgeon mentored by the renowned Dr. Rachel Lang. I didn't read them, but my coworkers did. One of them whispered, "He looks different now, polished, like he belongs to another world." I smiled and said he does. Then one afternoon, about 8 months later, my cousin Mia came by the cafe, breathless and half gossiping. "Ardella, have you heard St. Havens is under investigation?" I froze mid-pour. "Investigation?" She nodded, eyes wide. "Rachel Lang, apparently she's been having affairs with multiple doctors, promising promotions for favors. Gabriel's name came up. It's all over the hospital forums." I set the coffee pot down slowly. "Are you sure?" "Positive. My friend works in their admin office. She said Rachel's husband hired a private investigator. It's bad." Bad. That word didn't even begin to cover it. For years, I'd believed karma was too slow, too quiet. But sometimes it doesn't need to announce itself, it just arrives with surgical precision. Within weeks, everything unraveled. Rachel was suspended pending a full ethics review. Her husband filed for divorce and leaked messages, late-night texts, hotel receipts, photos. And Gabriel, the hospital, terminated him for unprofessional conduct. The same man who told me I was holding him back was now being dragged down by the very woman he'd traded me for. I didn't celebrate. There was no satisfaction, just a strange calm, like a wound finally closing. A week later, the first email arrived. Subject, "I made a mistake," from Gabriel Hayes. "Ardella, please. I need to explain. You have no idea what really happened. Rachel lied to me. I thought she was getting divorced. I was stupid. Please, can we talk?" I hovered over reply for a long time, then I clicked delete. The next day, another email. "Ardella, I lost my job, my reputation, everything. I don't deserve your help, but I need a friend." Delete. Then came the final one. "You won't even hear me out, after everything we've been through." I didn't open it. I just watched it disappear into the trash folder. Because hearing him out wouldn't give me peace. It would only reopen something I'd finally managed to close. That night, I sat by my studio window lights from the city reflecting off the glass. I looked at my half-finished designs, a logo for a small bakery, a poster for a local school fundraiser, and smiled. They weren't glamorous, they weren't prestigious, but they were mine. He once called me too ordinary. Funny, ordinary is the only thing that survives scandals. 2 years later, people stopped mentioning Gabriel's name around me. I didn't ask them to. I think they just sensed that I'd outgrown the story. White Ember Design had taken off in ways I never imagined. I had clients from all over the city, small businesses, art collectives, even a few hospitals that wanted new branding after their own PR nightmares. Irony, right? I rented a small studio downtown with wide windows that caught the morning light. That light became my new ritual. I'd sip coffee, play old jazz, and start sketching as the sun hit the walls. That's where I met Noah. He taught literature at a nearby high school and often graded papers at the cafe next door. We met because I spilled my drink on his notebook. He laughed, said I needed an excuse to rewrite that essay anyway. And just like that, something in me, something that had been quiet for so long, finally breathed again. Noah didn't ask about Gabriel. He didn't compare. He didn't demand. He listened. He showed up. And in his presence, I didn't feel small. I just felt seen. Then out of nowhere, Gabriel reappeared. It was at a medical conference my studio was hired to design banners and promotional material for. I was setting up near the entrance when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. Ardella. I turned, and for a split second I didn't recognize him. The confident man I'd once known, the one who walked like the world owed him space, was gone. In his place stood someone thinner, older, worn down by the kind of exhaustion success never teaches you to handle. Ardella, he said again, forcing a smile. You look different. So do you, I said quietly. He glanced around the lobby, maybe trying to find the right angle to seem put together. But there wasn't one. His hands trembled slightly. His tie was crooked. Can we talk, he asked. Just 5 minutes. I hesitated, but something in his tone, not guilt but desperation, made me nod. We stepped aside near the large glass windows overlooking the city. He started talking fast, like he'd been rehearsing this. Rachel ruined me, Ardella. She lied about everything. Said she was getting divorced, said she could help my career. When it all blew up, she blamed me for it. I was investigated, blacklisted, lost my license for a year. I said nothing. I know I hurt you, he continued, but I need you to understand it wasn't supposed to happen like that. You were always the good one. You cared. You actually believed in me. Gabriel, I said calmly, you don't get to rewrite what happened. He flinched. I miss what we had. I looked at him, then really looked. This man had once made me feel like I wasn't enough, and now he was trying to crawl back into the life I'd built without him. What you miss, I said softly, isn't me. You miss who you were when I believed in you. He swallowed hard. You don't understand. I've lost everything. No, I said. You just finally lost what was never yours to keep. For a moment, the noise of the lobby faded. Just two people standing in the reflection of the glass, the past, and the person who'd survived it. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. But I wasn't the ghost. He was. When he whispered, "Do you ever think we could try again?" I smiled faintly. I don't think about us at all. And it was true. For the first time, I wasn't saying it to sound strong, I felt it. The part of me that once begged to be chosen had finally stopped waiting. When I walked out of that building, the city air felt warmer than it had in years. Noah was waiting outside, leaning against his car, scrolling through his phone. "You're early," he said, smiling when he saw me. "Yeah," I said, taking his hand. "I finished what I came here to do." He didn't ask what that meant. He didn't need to. When Gabriel said, "I miss you," I realized he didn't mean me. He missed the version of himself I once believed in. And I'm done resurrecting ghosts. 2 months after that encounter, I was invited to an alumni charity gala hosted at the same hotel where Gabriel once attended his medical school graduation dinner. I almost declined the invite. Crowded rooms full of polished smiles weren't really my thing, but my studio had designed the event materials, and I owed the organizer my presence. Besides, Noah insisted on coming with me. "You spend so much time telling other people's stories," he said, straightening his tie. "Maybe tonight you should just live yours." He had that way of saying things that made even ordinary sentences sound like poetry. The ballroom shimmered with gold lighting and the murmur of polite laughter. The scent of champagne and lilies filled the air. I was scanning my decor, when a familiar voice stopped me cold. "Ardella." I turned. Gabriel stood a few feet away, wearing a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit, holding a glass he clearly didn't need. His hair was shorter, his expression older, his confidence cracked down the middle. For a heartbeat, the room around us blurred, but only for a heartbeat. Then Noah touched my back, gently grounding me. "You okay?" he whispered. I smiled. "Yeah, perfectly." Gabriel's eyes flicked between us. "I didn't know you'd be here." "I designed the event," I said. "Why wouldn't I?" He forced a dry laugh. "Of course you did. You always were. Creative." Noah extended a polite hand. "Noah Grant." Gabriel shook it weakly. "Friend." "Boyfriend," I said before Noah could answer. No hesitation, no shame, just truth. Gabriel's mouth tightened. "You moved on fast." "It's been 3 years, Gabriel." He blinked, surprised by the number, like time had moved differently for both of us. Maybe it had. Later that evening, during dinner, Gabriel approached our table again. He waited until Noah was talking to another guest before sliding into the empty seat beside me. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "That I miss you." I didn't turn to him. "You miss what you had, someone who believed in you, no matter how many times you disappointed her." He sighed. "You think I don't regret what happened?" "Regret isn't the same as change," I said quietly. He looked down at his half-empty glass. "Rachel left the country. I haven't worked full-time since the investigation. Everything's gone." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it, but not for him. For the woman I used to be, who would have pitied him and taken him back. He stared at me like he was searching for some small crack in my calm, some sign I still cared. But there wasn't one. When Noah returned and placed his arm around my shoulders, Gabriel flinched like the gesture burned. "This is Noah," I said, smiling. "He teaches literature." Gabriel forced a tight smile. "Of course he does." Noah chuckled. "Don't worry, I'm not grading you." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how effortless it all felt now. I didn't have to prove anything anymore. As the music started, Noah stood and held out his hand. "Dance with me." I took it. As he led me to the floor, I glanced back once, not to check if Gabriel was watching, but to remind myself how small the space he occupied in my story had become. He sat there alone, swirling the last of his drink, a man still trapped in a chapter I'd already closed. Noah spun me gently, and the chandeliers blurred into gold streaks above us. I felt light, real, free. When the song ended, he whispered, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said, smiling. "Absolutely nothing." And I meant it, because closure isn't a conversation. It's the calm that settles when the story no longer hurts. As we left the gala, I caught Gabriel's reflection in the glass doors. He looked smaller somehow, like a faded photograph of someone I used to know. I didn't wave, I didn't stop. Because I wasn't his lesson anymore. I was my own reward. As we walked out into the night, Noah slipped his arm around me, and I didn't look back. I'd already buried the ghost of who we were. 3 years later, I was sitting in my studio surrounded by plants, paint samples, and half-finished projects when an envelope slid under the door. It was an invitation to my cousin's wedding. Inside was a small handwritten note. "Thought you might want to know Gabriel's working at a small clinic in Oregon now. Seems like he's doing better." I stared at the words for a long moment, not because they hurt, but because they didn't. There was a time when even hearing his name could unmake me, when the sound of Gabriel would set my pulse racing with a mix of anger and nostalgia. Now it barely registered, just a name belonging to another lifetime. I folded the note and dropped it in the trash. Then I went back to what I was doing, sketching the logo for a nonprofit children's hospital that had hired me to rebrand their image. I smiled at the irony. The hospital world again, but this time on my terms. Noah came in holding 2 mugs of tea. "You're working late again," he teased. "Deadlines," I said with a grin, but the good kind. He set the mugs down and sat beside me, scanning the designs. "You've built something incredible, Ardella. You know that, right?" I leaned into him. "We built something incredible." He kissed my forehead. "Fair enough." Outside, the city lights reflected in the studio window, soft, golden, alive. The same city where I'd once cried in silence, now glowing around the life I'd made. Sometimes people ask me if I ever got closure. I tell them I didn't need it. Closure isn't hearing "I'm sorry." It's realizing you no longer crave it. A few months later, my mom called. "Sweetheart," she said, "do you remember what day it is?" I looked out the window, confused. "Thursday," she chuckled softly. "It's Gabriel's birthday." "Oh," I said, blinking. "I forgot." There was a long silence on the line. Then she whispered, "That's a good sign, isn't it?" I smiled. "The best." That night, Noah and I cooked dinner together in our new house, the one we'd built from scratch, every piece of furniture chosen, every corner filled with laughter. As I set the table, I glanced at the empty space where memories of Gabriel used to live. There was nothing left there, no anger, no longing, no pain, just peace. He'd once said he'd outgrown me, but the truth is I'd outgrown him. Because love built on sacrifice alone doesn't survive. But the love you give yourself, the kind that says, I'm enough, even when no one notices, that's the kind that lasts. I couldn't remember Gabriel's birthday anymore. Not the date, not the year, not the way we used to celebrate it. And for the first time, that forgetfulness felt like freedom. I smiled to myself, tracing my finger over my sketchbook, the one filled with new beginnings instead of old ghosts.